Hi, I'm Suze from the NHFT comms team for internal and corporate side of communications. I'm here today to introduce you to Paul and Julie, also from NHFT, who are going to share their personal story with you. All the personal stories within our Virtual Wellbeing Festival this year are looking at neurodiversity. So, Paul, let's begin with you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Paul Sheldon. I'm the Chief Finance Officer. I guess really it's only since I've been at NHFT I've been able to talk about my dyslexia as comfortably and as openly as I've been able to do, which is been quite a slow process, I guess. But I certainly has gone through a long period in my career not admitting that. I think probably times have changed and people's minds have opened a lot more than was the case. But for a long time, really, it was something that you didn't really admit, particularly if you're sat on a board and all of those things. It was seen as, by many people I've worked with, and I've heard comments, Suze, through the years about it being something that holds you back or sets people apart. I've done a lot of work in the last few years, just learning really about what more it gives me, which is very different to when I was growing up in the 1970s. One of my teachers, apparently this is, said to my mum, "Oh, he might be dyslexic," but my mum didn't mention that to me again until I was in my late 20s. So I'd gone through a whole period of school where my teachers broadly knew I could do it, and yet they defined it as could do better. And so I had some very interesting conversations with my parents growing up about me not doing enough work. Certainly studying for my GCSEs, I was always being berated by my parents that I couldn't sit longer than 15 or 20 minutes before I had to get up and have a walk around, and because I couldn't sit for longer than that with the textbooks or the pen and paper, and just had to move on. I now know that's how I work because that's how my brain is wired, but it's taken quite a long time for me to sort of work back to being 16 to go through all of that. So I think when I eventually worked it out, after my mum had said, I think I was about 28 or 29, I'd taken that many exams and failed that many, especially accountancy exams, that it really became something that I could start to adjust. So, as you can appreciate, both of you, doing all those accountancy exams, there are a lot of numbers to add up. And I've worked out that I transpose numbers sometimes, especially where there are double numbers. I'll flip them around and put them in a different order. Certainly can't write anyone's telephone number down right first time. So just sort of getting to grips with those little things that I needed to check my own work, probably 3 or 4 times, made a big difference. And so by the time I'd realised I was dyslexic, taking the tests myself, I started to work on it. It was quite revolutionary, really, for me. It's changed an awful lot in my life since I was able to then pass my accountancy qualifications, but I was sort of 32 by the time that all sort of happened. So I'd gone through my entire school life in my 20s, not realising to what extent that was the case. But it gives me, I think, Suze, because I'm wired differently, as Julie and I were talking about last week, I think it allows me to do that strategic thinking, which some people don't naturally gravitate to or have to work out how to do. That's where my head is always at. That's where I start. I have to work back to the detail because I can sort of sit there and work out in a relatively short space of time the moves, the 3 or 4 moves ahead that get us to the place that, which actually some people find really frustrating with me because I'm sort of already there. And with other folk, I have to sort of sit down and work through my logic about how I've gotten all there, where in actual fact it's just my gut instincts, just how my head works to get me there. So those, I think, that I feel is a real strength that my dyslexia gives me. That I don't know how you feel, Julie, but that's my sort of, that's my strength compared to if I can't do, I transpose letters as well, Susan, so E's and L's I can't do. But thankfully, word processors, as I would call it, from the 1980s, helped me not to make those mistakes in the way that I used to when I, everything was done with pen and paper. My spelling's atrocious, really is bad. But using Word, using Excel means I can sort of put all of those mistakes aside, not having to worry about them because I'm being helped. And yet then I've got those other strengths as well that compensate for that. So, it's been quite a long journey really, and I'm always finding out new things. And we had that presentation not so long back at NHFT, and someone was talking about short-term memory. And mine's terrible, but apparently that's some dyslexics also suffer from that as well. So there are lots of lists around my house that both my wife and I use to combat the fact that I'll probably forget something by the time she's told me what to buy from the supermarket. And I'll come back empty-handed, having gone out to get bread and milk. It's those sorts of things. So I think it's little practical things for me, Suze, about how I've sort of tried to combat what those little restrictions are, which sometimes mean that it's a bit more difficult on one hand, and yet there are so many other good things as well that have allowed me really to have the career I've had because I'm dyslexic. I've no question that has certainly played its part.
Right, thanks, Paul. I don't think there's anything wrong with having a list anyway, so I've got lists as well all over the house, because there's always lots of jobs either to do at work or to do around the house or in the garden. You need a list for everything, so I'm always up for that. But it is interesting to hear, like you say, perhaps sometimes it might take a little while to get a phone number right, but also how your brain is then wired for the more strategic role, which, yeah, that baffles me. And I can probably understand when you say that you're already a few steps ahead than other people on that. So it was interesting to hear. Thank you very much. Julie.
Yeah, so I've got probably a similar story to Paul, but I'm slightly older than Paul. So my time at school, I can remember, Julie can do better. Julie can't spell. Why is your reading age so poor, Julie? That was a big thing for me at school. They were always on about my reading age, always on about my spelling. I mean, I wasn't in the basic streams, I was in the top streams, but I was always, Julie can't spell, Julie can't read, what's wrong with you, Julie? And I can remember that throughout the whole of my pre-senior school life. And dyslexia wasn't talked about then. It wasn't something on the table, never considered throughout the whole of my school life. And like you, Paul, I was good at failing exams. I was okay if I didn't have to do exams. Practice exams I was fine at, but I couldn't do written exams. I failed more than I passed. And it wasn't, I suppose, until, I don't know how I got through my nurse training, but I did qualify first time. And still nobody really knew I was dyslexic until I was doing my diploma in nursing and I failed a unit. So I talked to them about it and they said, well, let's have a look at your reading and your writing, get somebody to read you a passage and you write it down. And they assessed it and they said, you've got dyslexic tendencies. We're not going to put you through a formal assessment, but you've definitely got some dyslexic tendencies here and we'll let you resit that module. So they let me resit it and I passed eventually. So still then, I didn't share that with anybody, didn't share it through my working career until my daughter got to, well, I suppose late senior school. I mean, I always knew once she went through school that she was dyslexic and the school said, no, she's not. She's not dyslexic. She's good at maths. She's good at all sorts of things. She's definitely dyslexic. Not until she started failing exams did they look at it. And then she's gone through her nursing career and she put her hand up and, you know, was assessed properly. And she's proud to be dyslexic. And that's what's made me stand up and say, if my daughter can do it, I can do it. So actually, I tell people I'm dyslexic. I can't spell. I'm with you on that one, Paul. I'm all right with numbers. I don't have a problem with numbers, but I can't do that alphabet when people go Alpha, Bravo, etc. You know, when somebody says to you on the phone and they recite the alphabet, is that what we meant? You know, when you're given a number plate. Well, I have to tell them I'm dyslexic because I'm about 6 steps behind them, and there's no way I can do that at all. But you're right about I'm good at thinking out of the box. I'm quite a wide thinker. I don't think in silos. I think very wide. I think there's lots of things that we can do. I've been doing some support with people on presentations recently because actually, you know, presentations weren't my friend at all. I hated standing up and giving presentations because I can't remember what's on the slide. You know, if I write lots of words on the slide, I have to read the slide because I can't remember what's on them. So actually, you know, there are little tips I can give people around presentations about using pictures and using all sorts of things. Because if you don't use words and you forget things, people don't know you've forgotten them. You know, there are different ways of doing things and you need to learn your own tricks. And you're right about when computers came in, you know, word track changes and things like that are absolutely brilliant. Unless I'm not very good at the two weathers or the two theirs and things like that. That's where I struggle. I don't transpose letters, and I also can't read phonetically. So I'm really sorry if I read your name and I don't get it right because I can't read phonetically. You know, and they're the sort of things I struggle with. But yeah, that's me, and I'm proud to be dyslexic.
Excellent, thank you, Julie. I suppose my question for you is around, you know, when you heard those messages from your school and your school teacher, they're really negative, aren't they, in some respects, and that doesn't help matters or help people move on.
It doesn't.
I'd like to think they don't do that now, and things have moved on to be better. But I'm glad to hear that you are proud to be dyslexic now, and you know you're grasping it. Well, both of you are, and you know you're sharing a bit more and managing it that way. So I suppose I was going to say around. Julie, you've shared a few tips and tricks, but I suppose I wanted to ask the question of how you've managed, you know, since you've accepted and what you do now as a daily process.
I think I have to accept, I don't know about Paul, I have to accept that I can't spell. And if people tell me I've spelled a word wrong, I just accept it. You know, some people are really kind about it and some people aren't. But actually, I said to somebody a little while ago, who says I have to spell a word that way? As long as you know what I'm trying to say, yeah, and it makes sense. You know, a word in a sentence, you can probably work out what it's trying to say. You know, can't do anything about it. It's just the person I am. And I think you learn to accept it. Sometimes it can be a bit painful when somebody says something, can't it, Paul? But generally, it's fine. You know, you just learn to accept that you think differently. Takes all sorts of people to make a world, doesn't it? And we all have our own super talents, yeah. And we're all different.
I think for me, Suze, it's I think it's certainly when I was younger, it didn't inspire me to want to learn. I've done the majority of that as an adult, not as not growing up, and it certainly made me feel like I was like I was a bit thick, I suppose, and I think schools these days are a bit more accepting of it. I think actually it's really helped the fact that I've accepted it, as you say, Julie. I don't care about my spelling. I wish I could spell some things, but I think it's probably a bit too late for me, so I'm not overly worried by that. Because as you say, it's And everybody's dyslexia is different. So Julie and I were talking about it last week, Suze. Our dyslexia isn't my dyslexia is not the same as Julie's, and it won't be the same as anybody else's. So it's actually it is part of who I am, and the fact that I can't spell cancel doesn't make any difference and doesn't define me in any way, shape, or form as far as I'm concerned. The fact that we can sort of, especially working for NHFT, try and make a difference for patients and our staff is not down to whether I can spell or not. It's down to that thinking that you described, Julie, about, or how do we think, which is not the same as everybody else, if I can put it like that, which is a little bit unconventional, a little bit different, and might get to a different conclusion that other people haven't thought about. Those are the things that help. Those are the things that mean that, as I said, I get on people's nerves sometimes because I'm thinking in a different way and they don't see quite how I've gotten to that. So I don't think it, I don't see as I struggle with it. I think it's about accepting it, trying to help myself manage it, accepting the fact that, as my dad still says, even to this day, about my studying approach, if I've got to read something that's a long document, I don't do it in one go. I'll stop, go off and do something else, come back to it and work my way through it. And like you, Julie, I've got a way with presentations which is slightly different to yours, but I've developed a way of using the presentation stuff, which is not a lot of words, because actually I use that as the reminder. I use that as my prompt so that I don't forget what the words are, but there aren't many words on the screen. And I use that as the prompt, and then my brain kicks in and remembers the point that I wanted to make at that point in the presentation. So it's it. There you go, Susan. I'm dyslexic, but I'm slightly different to the way that Julie deals with her presentations.
Well, we are all different, aren't we? But as long as you're happy and you've got your key messages across and it works for you, then that's what matters at the end of the day. I was going to say, because so you both shared some tips and tricks around presentations. Was there anything else that you think that might be helpful for other people watching this back?
I think it will be quite individual, Julie. I don't know what you think. I think it's taken me a while, Suze. As I've talked about before, you know, if I add numbers up and I have to write the answer down, I'll write it down, but I'll check it 3 or 4 times. That's me. That's something I have to do. But I think it's not being afraid to try and find the solutions that are going to help you. And I don't think there needs to be a sort of it doesn't need to be borrowed from anybody else. So I have, you know, my strong advice would be to try as many things as you need to find your way. And as Julie alluded to, you know, I've been working on this for a long time, I guess, and I'm still learning new things about dyslexic traits that some people have that I might have that, oh, I don't have that one. And then, so I think it's about trying things and not being afraid to talk to the people around you about the fact that it's something that is part of your life and part of who you are. And they might have to make some adjustments to that as well. Like I talked about with the notepads and things like that around the house. People then keep adding jobs for me.
It's interesting. I don't do lists. Because I forget to read the list. That's my big problem. I can write a list, but I don't read it. So what's the point of writing it? So I'm quite good at remembering things I need to do. That one I don't have a problem. But one of the things I'd like to think about, Suze, is, you know, reasonable adjustments. You know, people with neurodiversities like dyslexia, you know, are entitled to reasonable adjustments at work. You know, and you need to look at your organisational policy, because I know this is not just about NHFT, but all our organisations will have policies that support around reasonable adjustment. And actually talk to your manager about what will help you. you know, we're all here to support each other and work together. You know, that's important that you share. You know, you talk about what sort of tools do I use? Well, an iPad. You know, I find my iPad really useful. My work iPad. You know, not everybody gets on with an iPad, and I know not all my colleagues use one, but actually I find that really helps me as a tool, because I can write things on there, I can talk to it, because obviously it's got Siri on it, and it's much better than trying to talk to a computer. I've tried the Dragon software and I failed. I couldn't use it, but I can use an iPad. And I do use Siri, and I do use dictations. The other thing I use sometimes for some of these more complex documents is you can get apps that will read the documents back to you. You know, that sometimes helps, because I listen to a lot of audiobooks, so I can change some of the documents into like an audiobook and listen to it several times. And I know when I was learning stuff for exams, I'd record me reading it and I'd listen to it in the car, because I'd remember it then. You know, not always when I read things does it go in. So,
But
you know,
I can read things, Julie, read a whole paragraph and have to read it again because I didn't take any of it in at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that's a great point then, isn't it? If you can change things to an audio and listen to it, it probably does work for a lot more people than trying to read quite a hefty document, at least anyway.
Yeah.
And with that, Suze, it might work for people who aren't dyslexic actually. And some of the research shows that actually some of the reasonable adjustments that Julie's talking about actually work for more people than are just those that are dyslexic.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you. Anything else you'd like to share? Those of the people that are in the system or in, you know, across the county listening to this.
I just think, Suze, it's just about, it's not something, as Julie said, it wasn't something when I was growing up that was talked about at all. I think if it's something you think you might be dealing with, then talk to someone about it. As Julie said, talk to your manager, talk to somebody else in the organisation. You know, the staff networks might be able to help in some ways as well. I think we should just need to have that open conversation about it. We can help people embrace it and find their way through. Because if I'd have had that when I was younger, it wouldn't. The bit that frustrates me is I've sort of gone through a long period of my life without being able to do anything about it, being able to find my way through it. And so I think everybody's experience is different, but certainly everyone should be encouraged to talk about it.
And I think organisations need to look at this, don't they, as part of their offer to staff, but also their offer to staff they're recruiting. So I had an example last year where I had somebody coming for an interview who had dyslexia, and they asked if we could provide the questions in advance. I've never been asked before, but we did. You know, and it made a difference, and they were successful in getting the post. So actually, we need to think about how we support people coming into the organisation for interviews and who are applying for jobs that are neurodiverse. You know, dyslexia is only one of the neurodiversities, but we do need to think about it as an employer as well. So I'm really interested from NHFT's point of view, what our staff with dyslexia and diversities think we can do to support them. And one of the things I'm quite interested in is looking at training for our managers as well in this area.
Yeah. And it comes back again, doesn't it, around to everybody's individual. So we have to look at things on an individual basis to help each other. Yeah. Lovely. Well, thank you so much. It was really interesting to hear both your stories. And I'm sure many people will enjoy watching this back during the Wellbeing Festival week this year. So thank you, Paul, and thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Suze.
Pleasure.